Well, welcome to the inaugural Fantasy Golf Jags podcast. I'm Tony Altieri. This is Mike Thornton. And before we get started today, I think it's important to identify Mike and I aren't professionals. We're just guys that absolutely love DFS golf, specifically DraftKings. And so over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've developed a real good understanding of how to use some of the tools that are out there. Obviously, we frequent things like the PME. We tune into Gup's Corner. We're really students of all the different aspects in terms of DraftKings. And so we thought we'd impart some knowledge to some folks out there, casual players, because again, Mike and I have a day job. We're not investing tens of thousands of dollars like many of the pros are. And I think it's important to take into context what that content that those guys are delivering. And so what we're trying to do here, again, share a little bit of knowledge with the casual fan out there, talk a little bit about how we approach things, and how we look at each one of the guys in the tournaments, and then give you guys some insights into who we like this week, kind of where we're approaching things, some of the key stats, break down the course, look at the weather, and just share some of those things with you guys out there. Again, as always, at the end of the segment, we'll post our Twitter tags as well as our email. If you want to get in touch with us, we'll make our PowerPoint presentation, which will flash through at different segments during the show, available to you guys after we're done, once it's posted. And we'll just jump right into it if that's cool with you, Mike.
Sounds good to me.
Before we get into the PGA Championship, Mike, you had a pretty good week last week, right?
I did.
We talked about it. It's funny because typically, we're guys who are sub $200 each week. And oftentimes in some of the smaller segments, we're spending less than $100 in a given tournament. Sometimes it might be cash, sometimes it might be smaller GPPs, but we like to have skin in the game. And so the WGC is one where with no cut, it's almost like a showdown tournament, really. It's 4 days of showdown.
Exactly.
I think the big thing is, I had done a little bit just to stand what's going on, but of course, you had your best ROI week in quite some time, right?
Yeah, it's quite funny. Like Tony said, I want to keep some skin in the game, and didn't want to really invest a lot this week because I'm kind of saving it up for the major this week, and but wanted to stay in it so that we could keep in touch with who's doing well. So what I did is I took some of my VIP points on DraftKings and I purchased 5 25-cent tickets, and I got into 2 different GPPs with those.
Yeah.
And I did play, so in total investment was about $12, and then of course the $1.25 and 25-cent entries. And shockingly, I was in a winner-take-all $50 tournament with about 333 people, and lo and behold, I took that one down. I was really excited Saturday. I was actually third place in the bigger 25-cent one. I was two spots away from $400. I was winning 100 at that time. But of course, some of my guys fell apart on Sunday and didn't hold up there. But still, all in all, it was for $12 investment. I think I took home $98, and I'll take that every.
Yeah, well, that. I mean, the big thing is when we talk about like approach to how much you're investing and what tournaments you're getting in. We kind of have different philosophies for the way that we approach tournaments. I love smaller tournaments that I can get in where I feel like my odds are better. I can use the data. I can use some of the content that's out there to give me an edge in those tournaments. But you like to hit home runs, right? So for this week, for you actually to take down a tournament in something that was, again, we call it insignificant, but dude, your ROI on that deal was 10 or 12 to 1. That's a huge investment when you can play for 25 cents and then end up taking down a winner-take-all tournament. And again, with nearly 350 people, that's a pretty amazing. Do you remember what the total number for your team was?
It was about, I was over 550 something. So it's quite a few points.
I mean, it just goes to show you. I mean, you don't have to be investing tens of thousands of dollars to keep things interesting or to move forward in playing DraftKings every week. I think it's important to stay involved. I think it's important to have lineups out there every week because you need to know who's placing, you need to know how guys are scoring and how things are changing from round to round. In terms of the show, and again, we've extended that lead into the show a little bit longer than I wanted, but when we talk here specifically, we're talking about millionaire makers, we're talking about the large GPPs, we're talking about 20 lineups or more. So in terms, when we talk about shares, when we talk about core guys, when we talk about percentages, the context by which we're building is around that 20 lineup GPP. Now we will make some mention to guys who we think are great plays for cash, or if you're taking some flyers in smaller tournaments, and we may even reference some of those smaller tournament sizes as great opportunities for guys who are looking for an opportunity to make some money, take some of the data that they're pulling off of Fantasy Golf National or Fantasy Golf Metrics, get that content for Pat May on those guys, and then use that to your advantage in those smaller tournaments. In terms of the weather forecast, Mike, I don't know if you've had any opportunity to look at that, but it doesn't look like there's any significant weather, right? You've got thunderstorms looming. It's going to be hot. It's going to be muggy. So if anything, from a playing perspective, especially on the AM PM draw for Thursday and Friday, you got to think the players in the morning in both segments are going to have a bit of an advantage. The course should be a little bit soggy, a little bit wet, so things should hold up on those very tough greens. The fairways are crowned pretty much across the board on the par 4s and the 2 par 5s. And so I think that's going to make it difficult for guys to keep the ball in the fairway, especially as you get later into the afternoons. Sun starts beating down, the ball starts rolling a little bit farther, and again, you're going to have guys that hit what they think are good tee shots that are going to end up rolling into the first or second cut.
Yeah, the only thing I heard about that this morning was that they expect the conditions to be soft, which you kind of mentioned early on, but maybe it'll even hold a little bit later into the afternoon. And because of that, I'm looking at big drivers, guys who can hit the ball far but accurate. I mean, that's key. So with those soft conditions, those short guys, they're not going to get that extra roll like we've seen recently. So that's going to be a key thing to look at.
I think
for me at least.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. Length is going to give you an advantage on this course, especially because it's a long par 70, right? You've only got 2 par 5s, both which measure out, one over 600 and one pretty much 600 yards. So eagle is not an easy number to achieve. So if you can put the ball out there 330 to 350 yards, you're going to have an advantage over other players in the field. There's no doubt. In terms of course layout, you've got pretty narrow fairways. I mentioned most of the fairways are crowned, which is going to cause the ball to move left or right off the tee. Again, you've got large greens, but they're shallow. And what I mean by that is you've got this kind of bean shape with bunkers protecting both front corners and then rear bunkers protecting a lot of them. So you have to be extremely accurate with your approach shots. So for me, key stats this week, I love off the tee. I want guys who are going to put the ball in the fairway. I want guys who have great approach, right? Proximity is kind of somewhat baked into that, but I want guys that can hit greens in regulation. I'm also going to be looking at birdies or better, because birdie and scoring opportunities are going to be a premium this week because the course is so long and there are only 2 par 5s. Par 4 scoring, of course, so 12 par 5s on the course, and so if guys have a history of scoring well on par 4s, I think that's going to lend itself for them to be in contention down the stretch. What about you? What are you looking for this week?
Pretty much the same things. I'm not sure you mentioned it, but bogey avoidance is a big one for me. When we get to these tough courses, I think those placement bonus points are going to come in huge.
Yeah.
And I want guys that aren't going to blow up, that are going to stay. I mean, I don't care if they're shooting even, 1 under.
Yeah.
But that should get you. I mean, if you look back at, was it 2008 when we had to finish? You look at those top 15 or top 20. Those scores drop pretty drastically. So even score or 1 under was getting you top 20.
Yeah.
So, and you're getting those placement points. So I think that's going to become a big, just like it did at the Open and of course the U.S. Open.
Oddly enough, I know that this course, or I should say this tournament wasn't played at the same course last year, but at Quail Hollow last year, you have a lot of the same guys in the field, and Quail Hollow played tough last year. Justin Thomas, again, he didn't run away with it, but if you look at the top tier guys that finished in there, it wasn't guys who were absolutely mashing the ball off the tee, right? It was guys like Molinari, who finished second last year in the 2017 rendition of this tournament. It's guys who don't put themselves in bad positions, so like you mentioned, bogey avoidance. It's guys who are accurate and can make things happen. And again, Molinari's the guy because over the course of the last 45 days, he's been the hottest player in golf. One of the guys, and we'll get into this here in a second, that's going to be super chalky.
Who we've been missing, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've successfully missed Molinari all year. I was lucky for me with the Open, right? Like I pretty much was asked out after Friday, but then I doubled down with the weekend tournaments. Had Molinari, had Rose, was able to double my money I had in for the tournament. So that is another important thing is don't forget, even if you don't get 6 of 6 lineups through on the Thursday and Friday, there's an opportunity to continue to play and have skin in the game and obviously win and make some money back for the tournament. In terms of roster construction, right? When I look at the pricing as it comes out from DraftKings, the first thing that I try to do is I try to find value, right? I try to circle guys when I bring up that scoring, when I look at the pricing and say who's priced where. And one of the guys when the lineups came out, when I started looking, the first guy right off the cuff, even before the WGC happened, was Justin Thomas. Yeah. I mean, severely underpriced. Justin Rose is the guy that you brought up, where a few tournaments ago in the Open or even in the Masters, the guy was above $10,000. We're getting him sub 10K in this tournament. So I think it's important to find value. Another big thing is don't fear chalk. You hear people talk about all the time, that guy's going to be chalky, everybody's going to be all over him. It's been proven this year, probably more than any other year that we've been doing this, that chalk wins tournaments. So finding subtle things that differentiate your lineup, right? Don't be afraid to eat the chalk, especially if it's good chalk, right? Like we talked about like CT Pan, like what was it, 5-6 weeks ago where he was the chalkiest guy and he misses the cuts. That's not good chalk. But Paul Casey, Justin Rose, the Brooks Koepka of the world. Yeah, the Tony Finau's. When those guys are chalky, that's a great time to eat chalk because they're going to score and you can kind of set it and forget it, right? You can put your money in there and move forward.
Yeah, if you got a lot of money to throw away or put into the GPP, then sure, go ahead and take those flyers. But Tony and I, our money, we work hard for our money and we want to put our best lineups forward. So we want guys that we trust and that have, and they might be chalky, but you know what? We feel that gives us the best opportunity to get some return on investment for our lineup.
So as we look forward to the tournament, we've talked a lot about the way that we build rosters and how you do that. But when we talk about the pricing specific to this week, when I took a look at it, when I look at the field, obviously it's stocked full of studs. And from the top guy DJ all the way down through even the high sixes, there's a lot of guys that are premium golfers. What are your thoughts about the field and where you think pricing may push people this week?
Oh, well, just like this past week with the WGC, when I saw Justin Thomas priced under 10,000, I'm like, when am I going to get the number 2 golfer in the world under 10K? Same thing this week. When I saw it was under 10K, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I think, I don't blame anyone who goes up to DJ. Tony and I have a philosophy. We don't typically take anyone over 10K. We like more balanced lineups.
Yeah.
We will put in 4 or 5 studs, maybe throw in not a flyer, but someone we trust. Again, kind of good chalk that we know has been trending well. So, I don't blame anyone for going the route of DJ, but I think the 9,000s and 8,000s, you got some serious studs, and then the 7,000s. So I'm all about balance this week.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where a lot of people are going to kind of gravitate to. If you want to be the guy that goes out and gets DJ, I can't fault that. He's the best player in the world. Mm-hmm. He's fresh off of a number 2 finish and a win a couple weeks ago at the RBC. And so if you want to play DJ and take, $11,400 and dump it into that bucket, I cannot fault you for wanting to do that. For me, I'd rather build a lineup that I think is a little more balanced. I think it tends to be true where this year and probably the last 3 or 4 years, it feels like there's a ton of guys that can win each week, right? DJ and Justin are probably the 2 hottest guys on tour, but I mean, would you be surprised if Brooks Koepka won or Tommy Fleetwood won or Tony Finau? I mean, these are all guys that have opportunities.
Yeah, Fleetwood's due, so is Finau. My boy Jason Day, I always feel could show up. So it's worked for us this year. Again, we haven't retired off of DFS, nor do we plan on it. Tony plays the cash games more. I play the GPPs, and but again, even in the GPPs, I like to take those core guys because if I get my guys through and make a little bit back, that's great. But I also like the potential to hit that big one. And man, the last 2 majors, what do you want to call it? The top lineups won what do I call it? The chalk.
Yeah, no, for sure.
The chalk lineups were winning, and you'll hear that on most of the podcasts from even the experts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people get caught up in game theory and watching ownership and trying to pivot off of guys because they think they're going to be heavily owned to give themselves a little bit of a spread against the rest of the field. And the reality is chalk because it performs, right? Because it's predictable. Mm-hmm. And so people feel comfortable investing in that. And so that's why we say don't fear the chalk. This week, there's going to be guys who are going to be super chalky. One of the guys that I love this week that's going to be a core guy for me on my lineups is Paul Casey. And I imagine at $8,000, he'll be owned by 25 or 30% of the people out there. The only guy that may be more heavily owned than Paul Casey is potentially Tony Finau. Tony Finau's been a great guy for us. He's been a great guy for basically anybody who's invested in him over the course of the year. But for me, when I look at who I'm going to play and I'm going to have in the majority of my lineups, maybe 60, 70%, maybe even 80% of my lineups, I love Paul Casey this week. And then I like Brooks. I like Brooks Koepka a lot. He showed me something, didn't perform very well at the RBC. We laughed about it. He's a team RBC guy, so maybe just got there, got his appearance fee, called it good, and basically has tried to prepare himself for this major. He showed up well in the WGC last week, and so I expect him to play well because the corollary courses that I mentioned before, where he's performed well, and the fact that Firestone, from a difficulty perspective, is going to present the same kind of challenges. I like where he finished, so I love him. So for me, Casey and Koepka are going to be two guys, going to be core guys for me this week.
Yeah, I'm on I'm all over Justin Rose at $9,400. I think he's about $800 less than he was the last major.
Yeah.
And you probably heard the reports that he withdrew last week because of a back injury, I believe.
Yeah, back spasms.
Back spasms. So again, we had the same issue with Stenson the last major, right?
Yep.
He had something going on with his elbow. Tony and I love Stenson as well. You'll hear that. So Stenson's a key guy.
100%.
Finau, of course, and Justin Rose for me. And of course, I don't know how I'm going to get away from Justin Thomas at $9,700. I just don't know. I mean, we'll talk about the models in a little bit, but how do you stay away from the number 2 guy who's at $9,700?
Well, yeah, no, I mean the other guy that that I'm probably going to put in a bunch of lineups, and it's a guy we talked about again before we even started this, a guy that we've missed on all year and even referenced earlier in the segment is Molinari. Molinari is a guy. There's so many good guys packed between $9,000 and $10,000 that it's like you can't play them all. And Molinari is a guy who's kind of sandwiched there. You've got Fleetwood, you've got Jason Day, and here's Molinari again. Up until last week when Justin Thomas kind of ran away with it, and he had what we would consider a subpar performance based off of the recent trend. Yeah. Again, he is arguably the best guy in golf over the last 45 days. So he's another tough guy to ignore. I think regardless of where you're going, I think where we're going to see the concentration of ownership is going to be in that range. In terms of looking at the data, right, like when I ran my first set of models on Fantasy Golf Metrics, two guys that surprised me, right, that I wasn't really thinking about having in my lineups, but after running the data and looking at how they broke down, for me, I mentioned some of those key stats. I was very heavy into off the tee, very heavy into approach. And so one guy that popped for me was Gary Woodland. I'm not a Woodland guy. He's not part of my brand. He's not a dude that I play regularly. But in terms of driving distance, off the tee, he is absolutely phenomenal. I think he rated number 1 in my model as far as off the tee. His approach game has gotten better over the course of the last 6 to 10 weeks. He comes out and wins the Waste Management in Phoenix and then basically goes tits up for about, 6 weeks, missing the cut every single week. But he's really starting to round back in the form. The other guy is Joaquin Niemann. And again, I think the narrative on him is hasn't played in a major, hasn't played a lot of tough courses. But in terms of statistics, the guy's off the charts. In every one of the categories, for me, he scored in the top 10. Off the tee, approach, birdies are better. He just is an absolute ball-striking phenom. He kind of like a young Sergio Garcia when he burst on the scene. And so I like Joaquin Niemann. I like Gary Woodland. I'm probably going to try and rotate those guys into a few of my lineups. Again, when we're talking about a 20 lineup GPP play, I may have those two guys in 30% of my lineups. But both very surprising. Wasn't expecting to see them there, but Niemann makes a lot of sense, and of course Woodland because of his form recently.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Niemann. So I have a 12-week model and a 24-week model, and he's top 10 in both of them. I have no problem with Niemann whatsoever, and he was somebody I was going to mention as well. Somebody we didn't talk about, who you and I don't play very often, and I'm not sure why, but is Tommy Fleetwood. Yeah, and I know at 9,300 he's another one of those guys who's going to absorb a lot of that away from Molinari. But Fleetwood, as we've watched, he'll have that one huge day.
Yeah.
Right? He'll go off 6, 7 under. He'll probably shoot the best round of all 4 days. But then he hasn't been consistent enough to put 2 days together.
Yep.
Is that enough at 9,300? I don't know. At 9,300, I'm looking for a guy that's at least going to be top 10, and he has been that. So he might be a guy that I jump back on the bandwagon. I was on him on the U.S. Open.
Yep.
And he came through. My biggest lineup was with him. Of course, that was also the millionaire winner.
Yeah.
Also had Fleetwood in his lineup. And I almost want to say the next major as well, but I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I had Fleetwood this week. I had him paired with Justin Thomas, and I would say 80% of my lineups. So I was a little disappointed about the way things finished for him down the stretch on Sunday. But again, you referenced it. He has that day in every single tournament where he basically goes lights out and puts himself in contention. I think the big thing for me is you look at him, and I believe it was the U.S. Open. He basically came from nowhere, had an unbelievable round, and put himself in contention in that tournament basically without pressure. Very similar way like Paul Casey has done that, right? Or Matt Kuchar. We laugh about Kuchar all the time. Kuchar's the king of backdooring top tens, right? He comes out Sunday, no pressure, plays in the morning, shoots 6-7 under, and all of a sudden, he's in the clubhouse as the leader, and he ends up finishing inside the top 10 because of that. So there are a lot of guys. I mean, there's guys, and we talked about him earlier today. Patrick Reed is a guy that interests me.
I was just gonna ask you that. He's not popping in my models.
He's not.
But when I think of a tough course,
yes,
and the guy who's gonna grind it out, Patrick Reed comes to mind, and I mean he's priced great this week.
Yep.
I mean he's back to
$8,900.
He's still higher than he was at the U.S. Open, but still $8,900 for a Patrick Reed caliber, and a guy who just does well on these tough courses.
Yep. Yeah.
And you were telling me he kind of shapes his shots, and this course kind of sets up for that.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, he's a guy that hits a distinctive draw. We saw it, and I believe it was at the U.S. Open where he was working that samurai swing to try and make himself hit the cut, right? Yeah. But again, if he can be comfortable, him and Justin Thomas, to me, are the two best draw ball hitters on the PGA. If he can get comfortable on the course, and it's not a score fest, right? If we're talking, 15 to 20 under, I don't like Patrick Reed. But if we're talking 8 to 12 under, I love Patrick Reed because of that. Dude, the guy is a full grinder. He loves to compete. He loves being in the moment. And at $8,900, it's tough to argue with that price. You're talking about a guy a few weeks ago who won the Masters.
Yeah.
So, again, it's hard to steer away from him.
Where's he showing up in your model?
He's
not even top 50 in mine, so I got to be doing something wrong with my key stats.
No, you know what? He's not popping in my model when I ran it. And let's take a look real quick here if I can pull him up. So if we go... see where he comes out. Okay, so I have him 24th overall in my model over 12 weeks. So he's still top 25, but he's not your top 10 guy like you would want if you're going to invest $8,900 in a guy.
Yeah.
Another guy that showed well in the model, he ranks number 2 for me overall, is Henrik Stenson. You talked about him earlier. He played with an injury in the Open Championship. I think he finished in the 30s. So he didn't light the world on fire, but again, at $8,700, I'm not really looking for you to go out and be top 5. At $8,700, I want you to finish in the top 25. I want you to score some points. And to me, that's the most important thing.
Of
course.
With the upside.
And Stenson is an elite guy.
Yeah.
When he shows up, when he's working the 3-wood off the tee, he's one of the toughest guys, on the tour to beat. One other guy that is least worth mentioning, he's been kind of a controversial guy over the last couple of weeks, and I know a lot of people have been asking about him, is Bryson DeChambeau, right? So DeChambeau, we talked about it. There was a tweet that was sent out by a guy named Steve Rawlings, and I talked about with you. Talked about it with you, where it's guys who've if you look at the last few PGA Champion winners, it's guys who had not won a major, who had won previously on the PGA Tour that year, guys who are inside the top 50 in the world and finished inside the top 30 at the WGC. Bryson almost rings every one of those bells. And again, coming back, he implodes the last day at the Porsche over in Europe. He snubs the dude that wins, and that's all anybody wants to talk about, what a turd he is, right? Mm-hmm. And then he goes at the WGC, and the first 2 rounds lays an egg, but then fights back the rest of the weekend and has a pretty damn good Sunday to finish inside the top 30.
Yeah, after round 1, he was 5 over, and I had him in one of my lineups, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then the next day, he was 1 under, so he just worked his way back gradually, and then he had I think he shot 2 under on Saturday, and he either shot 2 or 3 under on Sunday. So he stayed strong. We thought, this will be a real test for him, because is he just going to take his check and start thinking about the
major, no-cut event,
right? Or is he going to stay there and try to compete? And he really did stay and compete. So for that reason, as well as some of the data points, I'm high on him this week as well.
He doesn't in terms he scores great in my model. There is no one specific category really where he really shines other than around the green. In my 10-week model that I ran, he ranked inside the top 10 around the greens. To me, he's an overall really good player. He's not super long off the tee, but by no means is he short. Mm-hmm. I think he could present a a unique opportunity to some folks, because I do think he's going to fly a little bit under the radar. Whether or not he gets a bump from the WGC based off the things that you and I just talked about, that's yet to be seen. But I think he's a guy that's going to end up being in that 12 to 13% ownership range. And again, there's a lot of upside with Bryson. If he came out and won this thing, I would not be surprised one iota.
No, I wouldn't either.
So in terms of long shots, we've got a number of guys, and long shots for the context of this for a major are different than they are in regular tournaments. When we start looking sub $7,000, are there any guys for you that you're kind of circling and saying, hey, if I have to invest under $7,000, these are the guys that I'm going to look at?
I was showing you this earlier, and I actually looked at Pat Mayow's key stats, and he had 12, 24, 36. And Henley was popping in mine.
I know, yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
$6,700. I've actually played Henley and actually trusted him, and he's done all right for me.
Yeah.
So at $6,700, for some reason he's popping on my model. I don't think he is on yours, but on Mayo's 12-week model, he was also kind of popping. But he kind of disappeared on Mayo's model through 24 rounds and up.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how he showed up in yours, but he's one that comes to mind. Again, somebody, as you play this, you get guys that you just feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And up until this year, he wasn't. But this year, he has been one of those guys. He's been strong I think at the U.S. Open, he had a good finish. I'm not sure what he did at the Open. I can't remember. But anyhow, he's a guy that, for some reason, is popping in my model. Again, my key stats, I don't know. They could be off. But again, I matched it up with Mayow's 12-week, and he made Mayow's top 15 as well on the key stats for 12-week model.
So let's take a look here. Let's look and see where Henley
yours?
finished at the Open. So Henley finished, he missed the cut, finished at 109. But prior to the Open, he had a T10 at the Greenbrier. He finished 6th at the Travelers, which is, we talk about mini majors. The Traveler is one of those tournaments. The St. Jude's, he finished 4th. Or I apologize. He finished 25th at the U.S. Open. So again, he's had flashes of form here recently up and until the Open. And we talk about it. You can almost, when guys don't show up well at the majors, whether it's the U.S. or the British, part of me wants to just toss that out and say, okay, hey, you had a bad day. It's a big spotlight that happens to everybody. But here we are again at another major, and so it's tough to ignore that. And you've got a guy, like you mentioned, Henley, misses the cut pretty badly at the Open Championship, but at the U.S. Open, which this is probably going to play more like that than the British, right?
Yeah.
He's a top 25 guy. And so is there value there? There's a lot of upside. At $6,700, to me, is worth a couple shares if you're throwing 20 lineups out there. I really like, I mentioned him earlier, Gary Woodland at $7,000. I do like Kevin Na at $6,800.
Yeah, Na is popping on he's top 20 for me. And what's interesting, both on the 12-week and the 24 model, he's 20th in both of them. So don't blame you there.
Yeah, the other guy that I kind of like in terms of his stats is Ross Fisher. I think Ross Fisher is going to come in extremely under-owned. He's going to come in probably less than 3% owned. Again, a Euro guy. A lot of people, casual fans, aren't going to be familiar with him, but he's done well. His Euro stats and his history coming into this on the European Tour are phenomenal. Another guy that I've thrown out bombs on the last 2 majors in a row is my boy Ryan Fox. Fox, his last 2 European events are top 10s. He's shown up in every one of the majors that he's played in. Obviously, he didn't play in the Masters, but the U.S. Open and the British, he makes the cut. So, again, another guy that you can throw a bomb on. Do I think he's going to win the tournament? No, but I think he could end up finishing inside the top 15 or top 20, and that could be the difference between you winning a lot of money on DFS.
I thought you were going to throw your boy Olsen out there, Thorburn.
Oh, well, I love Thorburn. Thorborn's,
he's popping actually in my model.
Thorborn's fantastic, but I think the only thing that scares me about him is there's a high amount of variance with him, and then of course I think he's going to get an extreme boost based off of the last few weeks. He's shown up in Europe the last few weeks. Obviously at the WGC he had a great tournament, so I think you could see a lot of ownership there. So I'm going to have some shares of Thorburn this week, but I do think you're going to have to pivot and find some other guys to differentiate yourself, because I think he is going to be so heavily owned. The other trio of guys, and we laughed about this, is any one of the Kim brothers, right?
Yeah.
Siwoo, Wee, or Michael, all in pretty good form. Wee Kim comes in off of number 2 to DJ up in Canada. Siwoo had a great WGC. Michael Kim wins and then follows that up with a top, I think, 35 at the British Open. And so there's a lot of value with any one of those 3. Again, it's a dart throw, and when you're talking about those guys, would I make any of them core guys? Probably not. But I do think if you're having to dip down into that area, there are some guys. Another intriguing guy, and I won't go back to this well because I've been burned so many times by it, is Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker's a guy, I don't know, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we were paying upwards of $9,000 for, and here he is sub 7K. He's absolutely god-awful off the tee. Like, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But, again, he's a guy that has flashes of brilliance. When he won this event, I think it was 2 years ago, he came out of nowhere. Nobody was on him. Nobody had him picked to even finish in the top 10 of this tournament. It kind of ran away with it. Again, totally different course. But, again, when we talk about guys that are kind of grinders, talk about guys that seem to excel in tough fields, Jimmy Walker's one of those guys. I will not be playing Jimmy Walker this week, just to be clear.
Yeah, both Tony and I were on him for quite some time. And he did us well for a while there. But recently it's been nothing but burns. And I watched that shot tracker.
Yeah.
And it just kills me.
He's the worst.
Area.
I'm the worst.
Is he in the other fairway? I mean, I'm just like, it's painful to watch, and I just can't deal with that stress. So when I look at that shot tracker, I want guys hitting it straight down the fairway, and he's well known. His off the tee game is just horrible right now.
Yeah.
So again, I don't blame you because you could say he's an elite player at times.
At times.
And he seems to really do well beginning of the year, but this year was a little different where he seemed to also peak sort of
the Texas run.
Mid-year. Yeah, so again, I'm staying away from him, but I wouldn't blame you if he went there, took a few shares of him.
Yeah, in terms of other spots on the board, are there any other positions where you like a number of guys where you think people can make some moves with their lineups? I mean, we talked about it. The field is so stacked. I mean, even in that range between $7,500 and $8,500, Cantlay, Mickelson, Scheffel, Finau, Casey, Watson, DeChambeau, Kuchar, Leishman, Grace, Oosthuizen, Webb Simpson, Thomas Peters, who's now rounding into form for the first time in, 2 or 3 years, Joaquin Niemann, Adam Scott, Zach Johnson. So, again, you've got a great group of guys. From that mix of guys, we've talked about Finau, we've talked about Casey, talked about DeChambeau. Is there anybody else from that mix where you think you'd be willing to spread some shares?
Yes. Well, you kind of mentioned him already, Zach Johnson. I mean, his recent trend has been awesome.
Yeah.
And he was a guy, we've played him quite a bit this year. He's burnt us a few times, especially when he was like the guy for the course.
Yep.
Burnt us big. I forget where it was.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was.
We have a name for that.
Yeah.
Are we going to come out with our names yet?
Yeah. We call that hashtag STB, or the guy that's going to shit the bed, right?
Right. And he, that's that guy who, data-wise, he's course fit. His recent form is great, and then he goes out and shits the bed for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But, you can't argue with his recent trend, and he's a guy, I mean, at 7,500, I said earlier in the podcast that I was going to be targeting guys that hit the ball a little further, but as we said, accuracy is important, and he's proven he can do that. And for $7,500, I just want him making the cut and giving me maybe a T30.
Yep.
And he does have some upside. He's shown that. If you look at his recent trends, I think the last three, you might have that available. Hasn't he been in the top 25 his last 3 or 4 tournaments?
His last, according to this, his last 5 tournaments, T17, T17, T16, T19, T12.
I mean,
so again, I hear what you're saying. I think he's hashtag STB this week, so I probably will steer away from him, but it's probably going to end up to bite me in the butt. The other guy that people have kind of thrown around is Ryan Moore at $7,400. He fits all of the things. He's a top 25 guy in my model. I don't think I'm going to have any shares of Ryan Moore, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on him.
Yeah, you know what? He did pop up. Let me see where he's showing right now. So, in my model, he's 27th. Again, pretty good. His pricing is $7,400. I've never. So this is where my bias comes into play.
Yeah, I'm not a Ryan Moore guy either.
Not that I don't dislike the guy.
Yeah, he's
a
not,
nice
not
guy,
part of your brand.
But he's just not somebody I've played, and I think when I have played him, it just hasn't done well for me. So it's not a guy that I'll be targeting this week at all. But I wouldn't blame you. Again, the model showing that he is. The last 12 weeks, he's ranked 32nd, and the last 24, he's ranked 26th. So he's ranking 27th on my model overall.
So last couple guys I want to throw at you. 2 of them I think are going to be pretty chalky. 2 of them I think could go under-owned. Luke List, Kyle Stanley. Kyle Stanley obviously makes a run at the WGC. Luke List is a favorite of ours, a guy that we've played a lot. People in the DFS community love Luke List. They think he's going to be the next big thing. I think both guys are going to be heavily owned. And then two guys that I think will go under-owned based off of recent form and just the fact that nobody ever owns them. Charlie Hoffman, and then, of course, Grillo. Grillo was a guy earlier in the year that was a core guy for us. We used him a lot. He's kind of fallen off form, priced at $7,200. And then Charlie Hoffman, we always talk about it. Shows up day one, day two. He's on the leaderboard, may even be leading the tournament, fades toward the back end of the weekend. But at $7,200, I always feel like I missed the boat on Charlie Hoffman.
We're always kicking ourselves. We talk about Charlie for, the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
And we just don't play him consistently. But I think I'm going to have some shares. I mean, he's just been that consistent. And that's a guy I want at $7,200.
Of course.
And then Luke List, he's how I took down the 25 cents.
That's right. Yeah, when you took down the winner take all.
He's been a guy we've played. His ball striking's amazing.
Yeah.
And recent form, I believe, in the last few tournaments, and he's played in some big ones, he's done pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, T24 and T39 in both the Open and the WGC, but if memory serves, that's basically because Sunday he laid an egg.
Yeah,
he didn't show up.
That's what he did for me this week. But again, at that price, he's a guy who has some upside. He can, with his ball striking, he can definitely put a run together. So I like List. But Hoffman, you're right. We miss him all the time. We're always kicking ourselves after day one and day two. We're like, we talk about Hoffman. We didn't put him in the lineups. What's wrong with us? Towards the end of Sunday, we kind of feel better about it because he does seem to come down the board. But again, a guy, you were saying you think he might go low owned, and I think you said that, right?
Yep.
So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, he never garners a lot of ownership because he's just kind of solid, right? He's vanilla out there, and people don't like vanilla. They like the new flavors. One last guy I want to throw by you, and he's a guy that popped a little bit in my model, and based off of the criteria of the last few guys that have won, like I mentioned to you, younger guys, inside the top 50 in the world, finish inside the top 30 at the WGC, won already one time on tour this year. The guy's been extremely up and down, but Cameron Smith and Aaron Wise. Both guys seem like the same guy to me this year, right? But both guys have won on tour this year. Both guys can just go super, super hot fire. Will you take a risk in any one of those guys?
No. Cam Smith, I actually was on the Masters, so he did me proud. Stayed on him a little bit longer, and then he just went on his cut roll, right?
Yeah.
Just cut. And no, I can't go back to him. As I said earlier in the podcast, my money means a lot to me, and I'm going to invest it in guys that I believe are in form. I want somebody at least in form. And I'm not saying form for 1 week. I'm talking, give me 3-4 weeks that you've shown some steady form there.
Gotcha. And so you're not going to be on Aaron Wise either?
No Aaron Wise. I played Aaron Wise actually quite a bit in the last 6 to 7 weeks, and he's let me down big time. So
yeah.
He can be an elite guy, but for some reason, I don't think how many cuts has he made since he won his...
I don't think he's made a cut until this week at the WGC where he finished T6.
T6,
but again, elite field, corollary course.
And what's his pricing at right now?
I think he's priced as $6,800. So again, you're getting a guy sub $7,000, already won one time on tour this year. He won at a tough track. First time that it was played down at the Fort Worth Invitational. So again, not that I'm a big proponent of him or I'm going to go heavy in Aaron Wise, but again, based off of kind of the narratives that are floating out there, he's intriguing to me. So I think that's pretty much it. We talked about a number of different guys.
I guess talk about we kind of skipped over the 8 price range quite a bit, and Cantlay and I think isn't Xander fall in that category as well?
There's so many good guys from basically $9,000 to $7,500. I don't think you can talk about them all, and that's why I think people talk about people being chalky. There's so many options there. Cantlay's a guy that people have floated out as being chalky, and I mean, if you look at his recent form, the guy went T6, T12, T15.
He's popping in my model, number 10 overall. He's
phenomenal.
11th in the last 12 rounds, 17th in the last 24, and he's an elite golfer who could give you that big upside for $8,400. So I don't know, just a guy I thought we should mention because he's coming off a really good showing at the WGC.
I'll give you another guy that absolutely no one is talking about and has quietly strung together a fantastic season is Alex Noren. Noren finishes T31 at the WGC. He won a tournament in Europe here a few weeks ago. He's just been in very, very good form overall this year. And again, when you talk about guys who have won on the PGA Tour, he's also won in Europe. He tends to play well at tough tracks. Again, he's not going to be that guy that goes out and scores, 21, 22 under. But in a tournament that's 12 and under, that seems like a place where Alex Noren could excel.
Yeah,
and again, you're going to be competing with no ownership on him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like Noren. I've been on him a lot this year, so I don't have a problem playing him. For some reason, he's not popping in my model. I don't know where he's showing up on yours, but he's not even in the top 50. Again, I question this model, but where is he popping for you right now?
Let's see, Noren. So Noren is in my model out of the 100 and whatever guys that are in the field. He's ranked 97th.
Okay, see, and for me, he's ranked 62nd. So
I
don't know why. I find it hard to believe. Again, it could be some of the Euro stats are not here, which we talk about that, right? I know in Fantasy Golf National, they don't pull in the
neither
the
does Fantasy Golf Metrics.
We miss out on that, and that's where you have to kind of go do a little research and check. Well, we know Noren's an elite guy. Why is he showing so bad here? Maybe we don't have his best stats that are over on the Euro
Well,
side.
I mean, we talk about it. You've got the stroked gained metrics, which a lot of people like to use, and in those, he's pretty much dog shit, right? I mean, he's a tee to green, he's 104, off the tee, he's 109 in the field, approach, he's 111, so he's absolutely horrible. But when we talk about the actual performing metrics, right, like the scoring data and how things do, birdies are better. He's 8 in the field. Bogey avoidance, he's number 8. Greens in regulation, he's number 17. Scrambling, he's number 9. Par 5 scoring, he's number 2. Par 4 scoring, he's inside the top 50. So again, the actual scoring metrics, not your strokes gained, he shows. But obviously, we put a lot of weight in those stroked gain metrics.
Yeah, and for some reason, he's not popping on my birdies are better. So those are the metrics you're talking about. But again, I don't have any problem playing Noren. I just think, for me, I won't be playing Noren. There's too many other options.
Yeah, I hear you.
And as far
He's
as
never been part of my brand.
One thing we didn't talk about is I don't even feel I'm going to need to dip down below 7,200. Basically, I put a couple lineups together. I'm not totally done with my construction, but based on what I'm seeing early on, I don't even think I'll be looking lower than 7,200, 7,100. But we mentioned some guys that I wouldn't have a problem throwing in a lineup or two. The Nas, the Henleys. But I won't go overweight by any means. Anyone under $7,000.
Of course.
7,200. A lot of guys we talked about it. Hoffman. There's a couple other decent guys around there, and even the 7,100s. Your Ryan Fox you talked about.
Yep.
I trust those guys a little bit more than I do in the sub sevens.
So
you talked about Sink though. Stuart Sink. Where's he popping on yours this week?
So Sink shows up. He's a middle of the road guy. Where I like Stuart Sink, and we talked about this earlier off air, is Stuart Sink is a guy who off the tee is going to put the ball in the fairway. He's great with long irons and with the approach. He by no means do I think he's going to go out and win this thing, but for $6,700, which is where I think he's priced, to me, there's a ton of value there.
He's popping 37th in my model, and that's
so again, he's a guy I like
at that price.
I don't know if I'll have a ton of shares of him, but he may be one of those guys like I talked about with Woodland or Neiman, where I may have him in 20 or 30% of my lineups just to get some exposure to him and differentiate some of those chalkier lineups that I'm going to put together. So last segment, before we go, I want to talk about who's your guy. When you look at the field, I mean, obviously we talked about that. We've basically ignored everybody from a DFS perspective, who is priced over $10,000. Who do you think is going to win the tournament? If you had $100 or $1,000 a place on this thing, who would be your guy to win this thing and take it home?
For me, it's got to be Justin Rose. I mean, every major, I haven't listened to Mayo, and I haven't listened to the Gups Corner yet. I know you have for this week, and I'm sure every time I listen to those, Justin Rose. What's
not to like, dude? He rings all the bells on every single match.
He's my pick, and of course, I already said he's going to be one of my core guys, so I've got to go with one of my core guys, I believe.
Justin Rose is phenomenal. I can't argue with that pick. For me, and again, it's going to sound crazy, but there's two guys that I really like this week to win the tournament. Justin Thomas, it's hard after watching him go out there and just basically not dominate, but basically pull away from everybody and continue to play phenomenal golf. What he's done this year is fantastic. DJ's had an unbelievable run, but Justin Thomas has been there basically neck and neck with him every single week. So I love Justin Thomas.
So just to add to that, he was going to be my top guy. But
Yeah.
when a guy wins a tournament the week before, I have this mindset. I
hear
just
you.
don't think guys
It's
can go
hard.
back to back. It's hard, but it's been done, and I've been burnt on it before.
Yep.
But at 9,700, I've said it earlier, number 2 in the world. When are you going to get that guy at 9,700? He should be priced right below DJ. So I agree with you there. He would have been my first choice until he won last week. So,
Yeah.
Anyhow,
The
who
oth-
else?
The other guy that I like, and again, I'm torn because he's never been really part of my brand. I missed on him at the Masters, and that's Patrick Reed. I look at a tough track. I look at a stacked field. I look at what he's done in the majors this year. I realize he won at Augusta, but he's a guy that just seems to continually show up in big tournaments. And again, the way the course sets up, other than Justin Thomas, I love the way his ball flight fits to this field. And so I like Patrick Reed a lot this week as well, too. So those would be my two guys to win.
Yeah, I will have some shares of Patrick Reed for sure. You want to talk about one of our other members who will be joining us
No, it's at least
weeks
worth
to
mentioning.
come?
Yeah.
And his call on Reed, and go ahead.
Yeah, we've got another member of our crew that couldn't be here. He's on vacation in Canada with his family, and that's Ryan Keefe. Ryan basically uses no data, no stats, doesn't follow golf, but Ryan is a guy that played high-level collegiate golf, played against a ton of guys, personal friends with Ricky Fowler. He's in contact with a lot of guys on tour, and basically he knows the courses where these guys play. So Ryan uses strictly feel and what he knows about guys in their game to make his picks. And it's funny because we laugh about it in tournaments where we've just done some side games with him on DFS in the majors. He's beat us almost every single
We
time.
don't laugh about it. We get pissed.
Oh,
about
yeah,
it,
no,
right?
no,
Here's
exactly.
Ryan spending 10 minutes putting a lineup together, and he
Yeah.
gets 6 to 6 through. You and I spending hours on the data, and he's beating us. So it's frustrating, but yes, I can't wait for him to join us in the future and
It just
give his
speaks
perspective.
to the nature of golf and betting in golf and why it's so hard to handicap and so hard to get 6 of 6 guys through the lineups, because golf is so much feel and how guys walk out there and feel that day or on that hole. You can have guys, and we've seen it, Jason Duffner, I believe it was at the Players, where the guy's just absolutely hot fire, and all of a sudden his putter stops working about 12 holes into the tournament and he falls off the leaderboard.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff happens in golf where it doesn't happen really in any other sport. When's the last time you saw a pitcher basically go lights out for 8 innings and then give up 5 dingers in the ninth? It just doesn't happen. Yeah. So again, Ryan's perspective is great because he's looking at the sport and the way that we approach it completely different than you and I are. And so we're hopeful that when Ryan comes back, he can add to what we've got here and provide just a different perspective.
And he was the only one in our group here. He picked Reed for the Masters.
Yeah, that was
he
the
actually
one
had
done.
told me that Reed was going to win all of them, all the majors.
Yes, he did.
And look what he did at the U.S. Open. Almost came back and pulled that one out. How did he do at the Open? I don't know. Did he even make the cut at the Open?
Let's see. At the
I wanna say he
Open,
did.
Patrick Reed finished 28th at the at the Open Championship.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, in three majors this year, the guy has shown up. So, again, he's not popping in the model, but you know what? He's that type of guy at a course that I believe you're going to have to not go necessarily real low, but he's a grinder, and I have no problem. I'll definitely have some Reed. I got to follow Ryan. He said he was going to pick him for all the majors, and he's been damn close on 3 of them. So,
Yeah,
and he
he's
hit
already
it on
won one earlier this year, so.
Got to go back to the well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that pretty much does it for us. Thank you very much. Like I said, at the end of the segment, we'll post up our Twitter handles as well as our email if you'd like to reach out to us. Again, I'm Tony Altieri. This is Mike Thornton. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you guys next week, so please tune in, leave comments, do all of those things. Like this video, shoot me an email, tell me I'm a piece of crap, whatever the case may be. We'd love to get feedback from you. We appreciate it. Thank you, and good luck.